Hi guys, today is the 30th of May 2019 at 40 minutes past 4 in the afternoon over here in the UK. Let's get straight into it. Iran, Russia, and Saudi are having a conflict over the Opec unity, which is the agreement over the distribution of oil from those countries. A conflict between Russia and some OPEC countries over scheduling is threatening to derail the entire OPEC production agreement and could send producing countries into a production free for all in July. OPEC and its non-OPEC partners originally agreed to meet in Vienna on June 25th, 26 to decide whether to maintain their production restraint agreement for the rest of 2019. June 25th, 26 is when Jared Kushner is going to be unveiling his peace plan. So, in association with the events around the Strait of Hormuz, we're looking out for the events that are happening in Venezuela. There's also these events happening around the OPEC agreement, which is all affecting oil and oil prices and obviously stock market as well. As I said, Jared Kushner is going to be unveiling his peace plan around June 25th. So White House senior advisor Jared Kushner is meeting with top foreign officials this week in Morocco, Jordan and Israel before he unveils the economic portion of his long-awaited Israeli-Palestinian peace plan during a conference next month. A White House official and an administration official said. It doesn't say in this report, but it's around June 25th. I saw in a previous report. So obviously that's something significant. And that's all happening while Israel is currently heading, or they were heading toward a political crisis. They currently are in a political crisis. This is because Benjamin Netanyahu has failed to secure a coalition for his government. So they need to hold another snap election, which will take place in September. Until then, obviously, there's going to be a lot of political jostling to try and get members on board to form this government when the elections do come around. So, I'll just say here, however, early Tuesday, in the second of four readings, the Knesset voted 66 to 44 to order a new round of elections. Netanyahu sought the vote as he failed to form a coalition, and his deadline was Wednesday. So obviously that deadline has now passed, and he's failed to form the government. So snap elections. Obviously the same kind of situation happened here, except Theresa May just about managed to form a coalition when she had her snap elections. Obviously now she's stepping down on June 7th. So we've got quite a few government collapses and issues going on. Obviously the Donald Trump issue and Russia and Robert Mueller and all of that still continues. Brexit still continues. As I just mentioned, Israel now having to hold a second snap election. Theresa May stepping down. Excuse me. Emmanuel Macron losing EU elections to Marine Le Pen. The far right is kind of taking over. You can see that push all across the Western world, from America all the way to Europe. There's a lot of right wingers taking front and center stage, and obviously a lot of their policies are very controversial and extremely nationalist. So really, if you weren't born in that country, then you have concerns. And obviously a lot of people live in countries that they didn't originate from, so there would be a lot of problems come the day these hard right-wing people take power all over the place, and not just in like small nations that kind of just get pushed to the side. So that's something else to watch out for. I already mentioned previously in another report that every minister from Austria's far-right Freedom Party had to resign after they were secretly videotaped engaging with Russians, and there was a whole corruption scandal unveiled. The entire half of the government collapsed, and it seems like all of the governments after their recent elections have had to form coalitions. So you're having one half of this and one half of that, and then something's happening to one half of that coalition where it's kind of throwing the government into crisis, and you're seeing that repeated over and over throughout Europe. So obviously, if you live in Europe, it's concerning. I do live in Europe. It is concerning. Um, Away from Europe, over in Venezuela, the crisis continues with the government there, Nicolas Maduro, still holding on to power, with Juan Guaido still trying to take it over. But you have tankers carrying gasoline and ships transporting food from Venezuela sabotaged last week. And obviously that reminds me of the story with the Saudi Arabian oil tankers being sabotaged and that being blamed on Iran. Except this is in Venezuela, and even though there may be Iranian assets there, I don't think they're attacking Venezuelan gasoline ships. The two regions, Venezuela and Iran, have one actor in common, which is the United States. And obviously, it makes sense if it was the United States sabotaging gasoline and food transport, because that puts pressure on Nicolas Maduro when the citizens can't fuel their vehicles or, fuel the machinery that they require, and they can't eat. Obviously, that incites more dissent against the government, so that I can believe. And obviously, over in Iran, it does seem as if the US government is pushing for intervention in Iran. And one way of doing that would be to agitate one of Iran's closest neighbors and greatest aggressors, Saudi Arabia. So keeping an eye out for any more potential sabotages that are blamed on other actors, which could lead to war in those regions. Everything's just teetering on the edge. Obviously, as mentioned, Donald Trump is set to visit the UK on June the 3rd. That's just in 4 days' time. He'll be here for 3 days. I believe he leaves on June 6th, which is D-Day. Here we have D-Day is an event that changed the course of the war and of human history. Not sure if anything significant is going to happen on 6/6, but obviously keep an eye out. He's arriving on 6/3, so that could be an interpretation for 6/66. Leaving on 6/6/19, backwards, upside down, that could be a 6/16 with an additional 6 there. So keeping an eye out while he's here. Obviously, there's been a lot of protests against his visit, the last one and this one. Security will be tight, but obviously, things can happen, so keep an eye out for anything involving Donald Trump and the Queen. Obviously, as I've mentioned before, the Queen also seems to be on the cards for making some form of disappearance before all of these other events unfold. Where am I up to now? Yes. So the trade war with China is still unfolding and ratcheting up and getting worse. China are currently mulling ways to retaliate. One of the big weapons in their arsenal is rare earth metals. They basically are the biggest provider of rare earth metals, and these things are used in manufacturing for a wide range of equipment. So in small doses to produce powerful salutary effects. These minerals are extensively used in smartphones. We've all got one of those. Batteries, turbines, lasers, electromagnetic guns, missiles, advanced weapon sensors, stealth technology, and jamming technology. Obviously, moving to sanction something like rare earth metals would be a very, very big step and would have global consequences, not just for the rest of the world, but for China as well. So it's a step that they would be reluctant to take, I'm pretty sure. But obviously, if it's part of the plan, it's part of the plan, it goes ahead. This is all set up to be in response for the sanctions that have been placed on China with, the trade, and obviously the situations that are unfolding with Huawei, the technology giant, currently unable to trade with the US, unable to do business with the US. They are fighting it in court. But should the courts decide that the US government has the right, then it may be that China takes this step as a retaliation, start sanctioning some of these rare earth metals. Very interesting to look at the chart. You can see here, all of this black here is China. 71.42% of the rare earth minerals came from China in 2018. Second largest producer was Australia, followed by the United States, Myanmar, and Russia. Russia and China currently kind of working together because Russia is also still sanctioned. So that kind of takes out, what's that, about 13%, and leaves you with Myanmar, United States, and Australia. Myanmar's a bit of a trouble spot at the moment with the government kind of massacring Rohingya Muslims. So you may not even be able to get that much mineral production out of Myanmar for 2019. So really you're just left with the United States and Australia. Australia is one of the countries interpreted in the Opec Go 2 video suffering from the massive earthquake that takes place either in the Indian Ocean or in the Pacific Ocean just off the coast of Japan. So who knows what the situation is going to be like with them in the future. So that would leave the United States to supply itself, where it really couldn't match the output of China. So that's a big weapon China's got in its trade war arsenal, and something that they could use in the future if they decide to. Flooding in the Midwest, extreme flooding. Currently, we've got a lot of Oklahoma underwater. The Midwest has been kind of savaged for the last couple of months. This report is from March. The bomb cyclone that happened then causing flooding in a huge part of the Midwest. That's when all the kind of like they had lots of pigs and farm life dying, chickens and a lot of that. And now, a couple of months later, we've got major flooding again. The Keystone River, the Keystone Dam, the Arkansas River, set to crest today. So more flooding in Oklahoma. And I don't know how bad that's going to get, but obviously, if you're able to evacuate to somewhere, it's probably a good idea that you do. At the same time, tornadoes, over 500 of them touching down in this year so far. That's quite a lot for just the first half of 2019. From Kansas to Illinois and Indiana, through to Ohio, out to Pennsylvania. When you look at it on the map, it's just like a straight track across the Midwest through to the East Coast. And kind of looking out for any vortex swirling like major events happening on the East Coast, quite close to New York, and that's obviously an association with the interpretations from the Opec Go 2 video, where we see the Statue of Liberty, some sort of swirling effect above the broken torch. Obviously that could be literal, or it could be symbolic of, you know, the torch going out, the light that guides the United States kind of going out. Also could be a symbol for the electricity going out in the United States or just in that region, New York region. A lot of different interpretations, but it's clear that there's some sort of swirling pattern. Could be a hurricane, could be a tornado, twister, if you want to call it something different, bomb cyclone, winter cyclone. Again, could also be a reverse effect, and you're seeing in the sky what would be happening on the ground rather in the ocean, like a gigantic whirlpool. Either way, sometime this year or early next year, within the year of the pig, some sort of major vortex event. I think mostly to do with the East Coast, particularly New York, as we say there. And obviously New York did receive on the 28th of May a tornado warning. One didn't touch down. Obviously, I don't live in the United States, but I think it's quite rare to have tornadoes in New York. So if something like that was to happen, and it was to be a major one making the news, then that may be a connection to this video. So I think I've gone through all the news reports that I wanted to go through, just bring you some updates. Last interpretation there at the end with the Opec Go connection, possible hurricane, tornado, whirlpool event, something vortex-like happening over New York or around the East Coast. Maybe connected with the electricity as well. I mean, if it's a major wind event, then it would definitely be connected with electricity, knocking down poles and all that sort of stuff. And obviously we had the huge transformer explosion in New York recently, and that may have been a precursor to more climatic events that may happen in the future. All of that is just possibilities that are being presented in this video. So you guys, that's the end. Have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and may the Heavenly Father bless you.